Members of the committee, we are now live.
Good. Start right with my mute on. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Committee of the Whole Planning Administration Chair's Roadmap. Please stand as you're able as I read the invocation. There, now I'm in focus. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those, especially this week, who served our community and who are no longer with us, so we can continue to do the work we must in their memory. So please be seated. And before we move into business, I just wanted to express some condolences, which I hope is on behalf of the council. There is a former member of council I actually served with from 1985 to 1988, Mr. Ray Simpson, who was elected to represent Ward 5. And his wife, Faye, passed away last night, longtime resident of the city, previous owner of Hurdle's Cleaners, actually. And they've been married, I think, well beyond 60 years. So expressing my condolences, and I hope that I believe that of the council to Ray and his family members and his friends on the passing of his wife. So with that, our clerk tonight is Julia Sipple. She's supported by Jennifer Page. Would you please take the roll? Julia.
Councillor Utley.
Present.
Councillor Martin.
Here.
Councillor Antosky.
Here.
Councillor Sless.
Present.
Councillor McCreary.
Here.
Councillor Vanderstelt.
Present.
Councillor Carpenter.
Here.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Present.
Councillor Wall.
Present.
And Mayor Davis.
Present. So I'd like to remind the committee staff and our viewing public of the electronic participation policy for our virtual meetings. Staff and delegates are reminded to keep their video and microphones off until requested by the chair. Full corporate policy 50 regarding virtual electronic meetings is available online to review. Further, in the event of a connection or service interruption occurs that affects quorum, we may recess for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. All rules for delegations under the city's procedural bylaw will continue to apply. And I will, for the last time, just restate what our new rules are that have changed some of our procedures. One is it's changed the name of this committee to Committee of the Whole Planning and Administration. Staff presentations are now listed under the presentation section of the agenda. Questions during the presentation period, staff reports are not allowed if there's an associated staff report. Points of order requires a seconder and are not debatable. A ruling on a point of privilege can be appealed without a seconder and is not debatable. All notices of motion shall be in writing and submitted to the clerk's department to be included in the agenda before the prescribed deadline. I'd also like to make an announcement that I'm sure will be of interest to many viewers. We've been meeting virtually now for well over a year and a half, getting up to almost 2 years. But when we meet again in 2 weeks as council, we'll be meeting in a hybrid format, which allows members of council and those who are coming to delegates to come in person or appear through a virtual format. Members of council or delegates, if they are appearing here in person, will have to prove that they are vaccinated or have vaccinated status in order to gain entry to the chambers. And I'm very pleased to report that every member of this council is fully vaccinated and in accordance with city policy has provided documentary proof of their vaccination status. So every member of council will be entitled to appear in the council chambers starting in 2 weeks. And just a warning, it's probably going to be a few little hiccups that first meeting, although we're doing training sessions beforehand, provided by our very capable and able IT and clerk staff. Let's hope it goes smoothly. So with that, does anybody have a conflict of interest they have to declare in respect to any of the items on tonight's agenda? Physically raise your hand. Not seeing anybody. So we're now down to separating items for discussion purposes. Please note item 7.1, which is the Bradford Heritage Committee report. Item 2 which is dealing with the priorities of the Heritage Committee for 2022. That'll automatically be separated due to a proposed amendment. So with that, who wants other matters separated, starting with Councilor Martin?
Yeah, item 7.1.4, please.
Fire Department. Councilor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you. I submitted to you a point of privilege that I'd like to speak to tonight. You can let me know when you'd like me to introduce that.
All right, let's get the separate items out of the way. Councilor Ratley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 713 and 716, please.
So 7.13, that's the sign amendments to the sign
Yeah.
bylaw.
And the other one is the building construction review task force.
And that is 7.16.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. So if I can get a motion then, and I believe, who's got it? Councilor Rutley. I think you've got the motion to approve all items that have not been separated for discussion.
We pull that up on the screen, please. Thank you. That moved by myself, seconded by my ward mate, Councillor John Sless, that all items for consideration and consent, 7.1 and 7.2, not separated for discussion purposes, be approved.
Okay. So I have to get into the Madam Clerk, if you could name provide us with the titles of the items we're voting on, and then we'll take the vote.
The items subject to the vote this evening are City of Brantford 7.1.1, City of Brantford comments on the County of Brant draft official plan, 7.1.2 Heritage Register Project Part 2 Phase A properties recommended for listing, 7.1.5 Item 1 Public Arts Subcommittee and staff recommendations related to signage for Prominence Point, and 7.2 all minutes.
I'm not getting it, so my vote is in the positive.
All items not separated for discussion purposes carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Councillors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Wall, Antosky, Martin, Sless, Vanderstelt, and Mayor Davis.
Okay. Just give me a minute, please. Committee members. Okay, so the next item we have would be moving into statutory public hearing, but member can raise a point of privilege at any time. What do you have to say, Councillor McCreary, and please make it succinct.
Mayor, I'll be reading from the script that I provided you with in advance today. It troubles me to do this today, but I ask your leave to speak to a matter of privilege which impacts upon this assembly. I draw your attention to media coverage today regarding a prior meeting of this body. It quotes certain remarks which, in my opinion, are erroneous, and I don't believe we can condone remarks that are erroneous and stand by mute as the public will see them as valid and factual. I want to address specifically the comments made by a member of this council, which impugns the character and integrity of this body, and by extension, the members singularly and collectively. I believe, Mayor, those comments serve to lead the public to believe that this council acts in a manner which is contrary to the rules and procedures established by Ontario statute and by our own rules and procedures established by this committee and prior committees preceding us, Mayor. We do and always have followed the rules and procedures exactly and to the letter in all circumstances. To imply otherwise casts doubt on the legitimate actions of this council.
All right.
The most onerous, Mayor, of the implication
Okay,
is it
let's-
leads
could
this
you
council
please-
to believe that there's been a successor to Councillor Weaver who's pre-selected by this committee without going through the process that we are committed to. I believe that impugns our character, it impugns our integrity, and does a disservice to the community.
Okay,
I believe
thank
those
you.
comments have crossed the line, Mayor, and I would ask that the councillor consider the implications of his commentary and the media as well, and ask whether the community is adversely affected by comments and behaviors like that.
All right, so I'm going to rule on your point of, sounds like a combination of personal and group privilege. First of all, I'm going to rule that if you're going to make a point of personal privilege or group privilege, which you can do in respect to what a member has said, it's got to be done at the meeting where the alleged statement is made. It's got to be contemporaneously. Otherwise, like someone could say, well, 6 months ago this. And I really do think Robert's Rules of Order by implication says that. I appreciate that Robert's Rules of Order say that in respect to group privilege, there can be a point of privilege raised about, let's say, a press report. However, section 5.714 sub C of our rules of procedure states no one may rise on a point of privilege to comment on allegedly inaccurate statements in the news media. So I'm going to, my ruling is not to sustain your point of personal or group privilege. So with that, I'd like to move
Mayor,
in.
I did not ask for sustenance, merely an opportunity to express my
Well-
opinion. Thank you.
Well, I've ruled your point of personal privilege out of order. So we're not sustained. Now let's move on to the statutory public hearing. Let's get on to the business for tonight. So there is one public meeting on tonight's agenda, and the public meeting is held in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of the hearing is to discuss the planning application and to hear from the public either in support of or against the application. At the end of the public meeting, the committee will pass a recommendation, which is generally considered for a final decision at the next meeting of council. The name of anyone who speaks in regards to any item tonight will appear within the meeting minutes. Anyone wishing notice of any further proceedings regarding the application should also provide their name and address to the clerk's office. The applicant will be allowed to speak first, followed by municipal staff, and then the public. The applicant will then have the final opportunity to provide clarification to any questions or issues raised during the two prior presentations by municipal staff or the public. So we're now going to consider item 5.1. It's a red line draft plan of subdivision 29T 21502 Telephone City Aggregates Business Park East Phase 2 North future extension of Oak Park Road and east of Wright Street. So I now ask the applicant, I believe it's Dave Aston from MHBC Planning, if you would please come forward, sir, state your name and present your application.
Good evening, Mayor Davis and members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to be here this evening and speak to the red line revision for the lands at 375 and 395 Hardy Road. We're really here tonight in support of the staff recommendations. Would like to thank staff for bringing this forward. This red line modification has been anticipated and working with staff as we worked our way through the registration of the phase 1 of the industrial plan of subdivision. And as you know, it was connected to the residential plan of subdivision. So this evening, the request for the red line modification, in our opinion, really is a minor red line. There's no change associated with the zoning. The zoning that was previously approved by council is not intended to be amended. And the red line modification itself really just represents the removal of a cul-de-sac associated with Pipe Street to provide greater flexibility for development investment in this plan of subdivision. So next slide, please. This plan shows the areas associated with the development. Oak Park Road kind of slicing through the industrial portions of the plan of subdivisions, which were 29T 11504 and 29T 11505, adjacent to Oak Park Road, and the portion that would be lower 11505 in this plan is the residential portion of the lands. So we're looking at the two parcels that are directly adjacent to Oak Park Road, with a small portion being referenced as the red line modification. Next slide, please. This slide shows the original draft approved plan of subdivision. Phase 1 is registered and under construction, which includes um, all of the streets shown on the draft plan. So those are approved, those are built, and you can see the red bulb in the lots that were proposed at the time as an extension of Pipe Street. The phase 1 registration did not include those lands for reasons associated with some archaeological work in the open space area, which has now been completed. And also at the time, consideration given to some greater flexibility on the plan to accommodate larger uh, employment uses rather than smaller employment blocks. So we're moving forward now with the red line to the plan of subdivision and working with staff as part of the process to satisfy what conditions are being proposed this evening as moving forward with the red line. The servicing associated with the plan of subdivision and the streets was all approved as part of the registration of phase 1. So the road designs, the servicing connections, the stormwater management pond that is on the city-owned lands, the street lighting, all of the infrastructure was approved and is secured through the phase 1 registration. The next slide. I think this is my last slide here, really similar to the first slide, just an aerial image that was taken within the last month of the current status of the site. And counselors, if you've been out there, this may even be not the most current as activity continues every day on site on the land. So you can see the streets that are in place already, and the area of the proposed modification would be just to on this area, the far left of the plan and south of Oak Park Road, and you can see the blue of the stormwater management pond that would be on the city land. So just in that area is where the modification is proposed. So we're looking to council committee and to support the staff recommendation, and we'll continue to work with staff in the registration and ultimately site plan approvals that would be required for the details associated with the development of the lands. Thank you, and happy to respond to any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Aston. We do have some questions for you, starting with Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. David, it's sure nice to see this project developing nicely from all the years we've been talking about it. My first question is, what was the market telling you to consolidate those 7 parcels into one parcel?
Through Mayor Davis to Councilor Utley, the market was telling us flexibility, provide opportunity for investment, and rather than having a municipal road there that in a way fragmented that block of land, what we were hearing from the market is have flexibility to accommodate both large and small employment users. What happens is with this block being a block on a registered plan, there still is opportunity to create smaller parcels as need be in the future through part lot control or consent. But what we're hearing is there wasn't a need for that additional road and a greater need to have flexibility for larger lots and potential users.
It may be early days yet, but will your energy requirements change if it's a larger operation that wants to develop on that site?
Through the chair to Councillor Hartley, I don't know the user on that site. I don't know that the energy requirements would change. That would be something that we could address through site plan approval with city staff at the time of having a better understanding of who the user will be, as city staff would circulate to the hydro authority at that time.
Thank you, David. Just one last comment, and that's the last slide that you showed really doesn't tell a story about how large that that development is. So it's quite remarkable. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, bearing in mind we're questions only at this stage. Councillor Martin, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dave, is this brought about because of you have a purchaser for a larger lot, or is this something that you're just doing to have that flexibility?
Through Mayor Davis to Councillor Martin, there's not a specific user on that lot. This is just brought about to provide the opportunity for a larger user to come to that lot or block and really attract that investment as an opportunity. We are working through some preliminary master planning and have had initial discussions with city staff that would show two potentials, one larger building or two medium-sized buildings, if you will, on that block rather than various smaller blocks with the public road.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Riley, do you have another question?
Yes, please,
ahead.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Just one follow-up to
Okay.
David. David, what would be the largest allowable square feet for one plant you can build on that site? And if you could make possibly a comparison with the Hershey building, I just want to get a picture in my mind of how big a warehouse or distribution center could fit on that property.
Through Mayor Davis to Councillor Utley, the bylaw permits a coverage of up to 60% of that block. I could do the math, but not quickly.
Okay.
But I would
Okay.
say that you would be looking at a building that could be in the ballpark of the size of the Hershey building if it
Okay,
were one large building.
That's what I wanted to know. Thanks, David.
Okay, next for questions, Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, David. When do we think this subdivision is going to be ready? Completely ready.
Through Mayor Davis to Council Carpenter, phase one is essentially ready. We had a discussion with city staff last week about starting to get site plans in process for permits next year. Phase two, this portion, we have to, once we, presuming council supports the staff recommendation, work with staff to clear the conditions. And we would likely be doing that through the next 6 to 8 months. And then it would be just a matter of phasing of development on all of the lands. And we're looking to have all of the lands into site plan approval and for permits within the next 2 to 4 years.
Okay, thanks, Dave. And one final question is just the timing is appropriate. Are you aware of those streets? Are they named after veterans?
Dear Mayor Davis, as far as the street names, I am not sure if those two are named after veterans, Wright Street and Bowery Road. I know we went through the street naming process at the time of the registration, but off the top of my head, I cannot confirm.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Dave. Stick around. We may have some more questions for
Thank
you
you.
once we hear from staff. And so let's go to staff then. So I'll call upon city staff. I believe, Sarah, I think you're going to be commenting on this. There's a Joe. Yep, there's Sarah.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Sarah Haig, Planner in Development Planning. I have prepared a presentation this evening regarding a red line revision to draft plan of subdivision, file 29T-21502 for Telephone City Aggregates or TCA Business Park East, Phase 2. This presentation will provide an overview of the application as well as the planning analysis completed by staff. Next slide, please. An application has been received for a red line revision to a draft approved plan of subdivision, file number 29T-11504, on the lands legally known as part of lots 18 to 21 and part of the road allowance between lots 18 to 19, concession 3 in the geographic township of Brantford. This subdivision was previously approved by council, and this proposed amendment to the approved draft plan is specific to phase 2 only and reduces the number of industrial blocks from 8 to 1 by consolidating blocks 19 to 26 into one larger industrial block, which is approximately 6.5 hectares in size. It also eliminates a portion of Street C, also known as Pipe Street, which is currently identified as a cul-de-sac that would provide access and frontage for blocks 19 to 26. The cul-de-sac lands will now be added to the combined industrial block for a net increase of 0.768 hectares of industrial lands. This modification will result in a T intersection at Pipe and Wright Streets and one large block for future industrial uses. Next slide, please. The subdivision is located in the Northwest Industrial Park, south of Hardy Road and north of Oak Park Road. The phase 2 lands, located east of Wright Street at the southeast corner of the subject lands, consists of 10.3 hectares of the entire 39.4 hectare draft approved plan of subdivision. Phase 1 has been registered and development is well underway. Phase 2 consists of 2 open space blocks totaling 3.8 hectares and 8 industrial blocks totaling 5.7 hectares. A portion of the subject lands are wooded with wetlands located along the southern part of the subject lands adjacent to the Grand River, and a wooded elevated area is located along the east and north side of the subdivision. The Grand Valley Trail runs through the ridge on the east side of the subject lands. The area surrounding the subject lands are currently under development and are comprised primarily of industrial and open space zones. A 60-meter wide strip of land owned by the city abuts the southwest property of the subject lands, separating these lands from other lands owned by the applicant. The western portion of the strip has been developed into a 2-lane road to provide access to this development, which ends at a T intersection at Wright Street. The lands further south are zoned for a mix of residential and open space uses, while the lands further north and west are comprised of a mixed use of industrial and commercial uses. Next slide, please. I've included some site photos to provide some context. This photo was taken at the intersection of Wright Street and Oak Park Road, looking northeast towards the phase 2 lands. Next slide, please. This photo was taken at that same intersection, looking northwest up Oak Park Road. Next slide, please. This photo was taken at the same location, but looking north towards the phase 1 lands. Next slide, please. And this photo was taken from Wright Street, just north of that intersection, looking east towards the phase 2 lands. Next slide, please. In 2014, council granted draft plan approval to the subdivision, and zoning bylaw 160-90 was amended to facilitate the development of the lands for industrial uses. Council's decisions were appealed to the OMB, the Ontario Municipal Board, which subsequently upheld council's decisions in December of 2015. In 2019, the applicant applied for an extension to draft approved plan of subdivision 29T-11504, which council approved. In 2020, the applicant requested that the holding provision be removed from the subject lands. The holding provision was removed for phase 1 of the draft plan of subdivision only, and that subdivision was recently registered as 2M-1963. This application pertains only to phase 2 of the approved draft plan, to which the holding provision still applies. Next slide, please. The proposal is consistent with the growth plan and the provincial policy statement, or the PPS. The PPS and the growth plan support improved land use planning and promote efficient development patterns, which optimize the use of the land, resources, and public investment in infrastructure. The PPS promotes economic development and competitiveness by providing a range and choice of suitable sites for employment. The PPS states that the protection and preservation of natural heritage features should be maintained where possible, recognizing linkages between and among natural heritage features and areas. The official plan designates the subject lands as general employment and core natural area, and the proposed application supports the vision of the official plan, by most effectively using employment lands, which could result in the creation of additional jobs. No changes to the proposed designations. No changes are proposed to the designations. Next slide, please. The phase 2 lands of the draft approved plan of subdivision consists of 8 industrial blocks, 2 open space blocks, and a cul-de-sac, Street C or Pipe Street, which provides access to those blocks. Next slide, please. The proposed revision to the approved draft plan reduces the number of industrial blocks by 7 and results in the consolidation of blocks 19 to 26 into one larger block, which is 6.5 hectares in size. It also eliminates a portion of Street C, Pipe Street, which terminates in a cul-de-sac. Street C was previously required to provide access and frontage for blocks 19 to 26. Next slide, please. If approved, this red line revision will now result in a large single block for future industrial uses and a T intersection at Pipe and Wright Streets. The red line revision does not necessitate the need to modify the approved zoning, as the new single block would comply with the applicable zoning. The draft plan of subdivision also includes 2 open space blocks to the south, identified as blocks 2 and 3 on the red line draft plan. These blocks were part of the original draft plan approval. No changes are proposed to the development limits, and these lands will be conveyed to the city. The phasing of the draft approved plan of subdivision is now illustrated on the red line draft plan. Next slide, please. The industrial portion of the lands are zoned holding general industrial exception 54 zone, H-M2-54, and the open space blocks are zoned open space restricted zone, OS3. No amendments to the permitted zoning are required as a result of the proposed red line revision. Next slide, please. The proposed red line revision results in the elimination of a cul-de-sac, which increases the developable lands by utilizing what would have been the municipal right-of-way and provides increased flexibility of industrial lands for development. The engineering department has commented that they have no concerns with the proposed amendment, provided the conditions of draft plan approval do not change. Planning staff confirms that the draft plan conditions are not being modified, except for the elimination of any reference to Street C. All development on the subject lands will be subject to site plan control, which will also include consultation with the ward councillors. Next slide, please. In conclusion, planning staff recommend that red line revision to draft approved plan of subdivision file 29T-21502 be approved, subject to the existing conditions of draft approval, as it is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan and the official plan. The application represents good planning, and the proposed changes will provide the opportunity for a larger industrial employer to locate within the city of Brantford. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sarah, for a very thorough presentation. So questions for you. First, we'll start with Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sarah, thank you for your presentation. That was very well done. With the proposed elimination of the cul-de-sac, would access to the site come from Oak Park Road or Wright Street, or possibly both?
Through the chair to the councillor, access to the site would currently be provided through Wright Street.
Okay, so Oak Park would remain sort of untouched as an access point?
Through the chair, correct. As the blocks are being consolidated into one, access is provided through Wright Street, and access would not be required off of Oak Park Road.
Yeah, but if there were 3, one larger and 2 smaller, would they also have access from Wright Street, or would that have to be determined?
Preliminary kind of plans all still require just access off of Wright Street. There's still no
Okay.
access proposed.
All right, appreciate that. Thanks, Sarah.
Councillor Sluss, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sarah, I don't know whether you can answer this, but council recently delegated authority to staff to handle red line revisions. This one's coming here, I believe, because it was in the pipeline before that was approved. If it had happened 6 months from now, would this be coming to council, or would this be something that would be handled at a staff level?
through the mayor to the councillor, Nicole Wilmot, Director of Planning. This would still be coming to the council floor, because while staff agree with Mr. Assen in the sense that the context of this amendment is quite minor, however, it is affecting and impacting the street pattern that was approved by council through the draft plan of subdivision that was approved. And so these types of matters would still be coming to council for review and approval.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Nicole. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, not seeing any other questions. Thank you very much, Sarah. So this would be the part of the meeting where members of the public can voice their objections, either in objection or in support. But under a virtual format, members of the public who wish to speak to this would register beforehand, and we've had no one register prior to this morning to speak to this matter. So we'll now go to complete the hearing. We'll go to the applicant. Mr. Aston, is there anything you want to add, given the information or questions came through the staff presentation?
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Just a couple quick things for information to answer some of the previous questions. For Councillor Utley, I took a quick look, and one large building would be about 340,000 square feet on that block, just for an idea. And just follow up to staff's comment and the questions on access. All access would be to Pipe Street or Wright Street. There is in fact no direct access permitted to Oak Park Road. So access would be to internal streets and nothing proposed to Oak Park Road. So other than those just few minor comments, again, I appreciate the staff presentation, and they've been great working with us, and we look forward to the opportunity to move this forward with them. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Dave. Does anybody have any questions for Dave? Seeing none. That will conclude the public hearing portion of this particular item. So let's move on to deal with the resolution. I believe, Councillor Utley, you've got that resolution. If you would please read it as we share it, and if you've got a seconder, state who the seconder is.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Sless, that that the redlined draft plan of subdivision application 29T-21502 submitted by Telephone City Aggregates Inc. TCA, affecting lands located north of the future extension of Oak Park Road and east of Wright Street, TCA Business Park East Phase 2, requesting a red line revision to draft approved plan of subdivision 29T-11504 be approved. And B, that pursuant to section 51-38 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 CP 13, the following statement shall be included in the notice of decision. Regard has been had for all written and oral submissions received from the public before the decision was made in relation to this planning matter, as discussed in section B282 of report 2021-668. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So it's on the floor. Any discussion? Seeing no electronically raised hands. Oh, Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a comment. This is a good news story. The development community obviously thinks that there's interest in our community to attract large industry of sorts to come to the community and provide large numbers of jobs. And I think that's important going forward. We're just coming out of a bad time as a society, and to have this type of optimism being shown by the development community is a very good thing. And it was also good to hear this evening that their phase 1 is looking for permits early in the new year. So obviously there's activity in the market, and for folks that are looking for jobs, hang in there. There's jobs on their way. It appears that these folks are creating the opportunity to create employment for folks in Brantford. So good news story. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to comment on and thank TCA Developments. TCA aggregates have been in this community for a long, long time, and they've stayed with our community. And now they're into a new phase of switching from building materials to actually building developments. And I think that's wonderful news. And I commend TCA for staying with us for Councillor Sless. It must be 10 or more years this project has been in the works. So I'll leave it at that. And I think it's just like Councillor Sless said, it's great news.
All right, not seeing any hands raised for further discussion. Julie, would you please take the vote?
Item 5.1, Redline Draft Plan of Subdivision 29T21502, Telephone City Aggregates, Inc. is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilborg, Wall, Antosky, Martin, Sless, and Vanderstel.
All right, we would now move into presentations or delegations, but we have no registered delegations or staff presentations for tonight's meeting. So we'll move into the items for consideration consent that were separated for discussion purposes. And I believe Councillor McCreary, you got the motion to put those items on the floor. If you'd please read your motion and state your seconder.
Mayor, thank you. I'm the mover. Councillor Martin is the seconder. That all items for consideration, consent items 7.1 and 7.2, separated for discussion purposes, be approved.
Thank you. So we'll move into the first item that was separated, and that is item 7.1.3, the proposed amendments to the City of Brantford's municipal code, in particular outdoor signs. And I believe, Councillor Utley, you asked for this to be separated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff. In the report, it mentions a distance that signs, digital signs should be 30 meters out from the intersection. And I just wanted to clarify, where does that 30 meters start at? Is it the middle of the intersection, which I doubt, or is it the edge of the property in question?
There's Jill.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Utley, Jill Binkley, Manager of Property Standards and Bylaws. So the distance would actually be 50 meters that is currently established within the bylaw, and it's actually from the edge of the property.
Thank you very much, Ms. Binkley. I'm not sure where I got that. I'm sure I saw 30 meters somewhere in that report. And any companies that are within that 15 meters now, would they be grandfathered if there is any changes to that distance?
Through the chair, I'm not sure if you can hear me, Councillor Utley. I think I'm freezing on my end, but
Yeah,
yes,
I can hear you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Yes, they would be grandfathered.
Okay, thank you very much, Jill.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Jill. Jill, could you help us understand or help the public understand a little bit more about the minimum dwell time, what that is, and why it's moving from 3 seconds to 20 seconds?
Sure, thanks. Councillor Vanderstel, through you to the committee. what the minimum dwell time does is actually establish more of a static picture. So it's decreasing what it could be perceived as flashing or shorter times that could be more distracting for drivers. So the Transportation Association of Canada actually recommends, and I think the Ministry of Transportation has taken this as well, that digital signs mimic more of a static sign.
Okay, and that's consistently applied throughout the other municipalities, up to 20 seconds including, right?
Through the chair to Councillor Vanderstel, that is correct. It looks like municipalities are moving towards that number, so it is relatively recent. I think this past summer was just when the Ministry of Transportation updated their corridor policy, and the City of Guelph, I think, was the most recent municipality, again, just this past summer.
Okay, and through you again, so the brightness that people often complain about, either drivers or people who are living next to these digital billboards, how do we manage and how do we control the brightness? How do you measure that? How do we set that standard in place and keep it there?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Vanderstel, very good question. There are certain tools that you can buy to measure the brightness, or we could use, depending on the settings for the sign. A lot of them are computerized, so we could work with the operators to view the settings and things of that nature. So we would likely start with connecting with the operator. Okay.
And should it come to pass that a sign or signage in the city of Brantford comes into new ownership, how is the purchasing company made aware of what our standards are and not to exceed them, especially residentially?
Through the chair to Councillor Vanderstel, so if there is a new sign that is purchased or proposed, then they would apply for a permit, and at that time they would be communicated all of the requirements that have to be met.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wall, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Sorry to rehash this over and over again. I just want to confirm the current signs that are in the city then that are, in my words, obnoxiously bright. Did you say that those are going to be rectified, or those ones that are currently there are grandfathered in and are not likely to change their brightness? Just want to make sure.
So through the chair to Councillor Wall, we would still review the brightness, and this is a new requirement. So, if there is a complaint, then we can certainly work with the operator and go from there. I think any signs that are approved through a permit right now would be grandfathered in. But if it's, something that we could work with the operator on the brightness on, we could do that.
Does your office receive many complaints regarding the brightness of these signs? I mean, another speaker mentioned, I've received a number of complaints about the brightness of these signs.
Through the chair, it's not high on our list of complaints. So now that we'd be able to communicate, any new changes, it may spark some more complaints, but we do have an evening shift of bylaw staff officers that are on and weekends as well. So we would have a faster response time to any complaints that do come in.
So as I was thinking about formulating my question, the term grandfather came in, and I was wondering if that's the appropriate term. And then my second question is there a way to remedy something that's been grandfathered in, such as these signs? Is there a way that this council is able to say, okay, no, with enough notice, we are going to be changing the rules?
So through the chair to Councillor Wall, so if it was approved when it was first installed, then it would be grandfathered in. So as far as brightness, if that was something that had changed, then we could certainly look at that as the new requirements are set. I don't know if that helps.
Can we overrule something that's grandfathered in? I think was my question.
Through the chair to Councillor Wall, I may just call upon the chief building official if he's here and can answer. I just don't want to misspeak on the grandfathering portion.
Thanks, Jill. Good evening. Andy McMahon, Chief Building Official, Director of Building Services. Through the chair to Councillor, the way the bylaw is currently worded, it allows existing signs that were legally established to remain.
Okay, that part I understand. My question is can we overrule that? Like, we can change the bylaw, right?
Correct. That section could be amended.
But only if, okay. Thank you both.
All right, Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just further to what Councillor Wall was talking about, I was concerned with the dwell time. And if we're going from 3 seconds to 20 seconds, again, on an existing sign, are they obligated to change their durations because we've changed the law?
Through the chair to you, Councillor. No, I don't believe that we would be able to make them change the dwell times on that. The way that section of the bylaw is worded is that, if it was lawfully erected prior to the bylaw coming into force, then it can remain. It does go on to say that if the sign is removed or altered, then it would have to comply with the bylaw. So if we're talking about, somebody taking a sign down and moving it or replacing it on the lot, then we would enforce the new provisions. But simply changing the messaging or something on a sign does not require them to comply with the new bylaw.
Okay, I just wondered, did we have conversation with the industry through this process?
Through the chair, yes, we did.
Okay, because I'm just wondering, when you take the duration from 3 seconds to 20 seconds, does that impact their ability to sell time on these signs? Like they would obviously have less customers, but for longer periods of time. So I don't know whether this financially changes the game for them or not. And I don't know whether that came up in your discussions with them.
Through the chair, I'm not aware of that, of what their policy is, how they sell their time, whether it would still be the same and they would just have less number of times that they were shown on that sign, but for a longer period of time. But that's not something that we discussed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to comment. One of the pieces of information that we got back was that this had been circulated through the chamber, who specifically reached out to any of their businesses that might have a direct interest in this, and there was no negative comments received. In fact, there was a very specific positive one. So I mean, I don't have a sign, and I don't know, but it seems to be amenable to our community and those that that would be implicated by it. Thanks.
Yeah, I've got a question, Jill, if you please come back. This has to do with the separation, the distance between the intersection and the sign. And do I understand correctly that what's being proposed won't change what we currently provide in the bylaw?
Through the chair to committee, that is correct, Mayor Davis. So 50 meters was established previously through council, and I think the last update to this bylaw was in 2012, and the 50-meter distance separation was upheld for intersections, and they also added in the pedestrian signal to that very clause as well. So the latest I think that was reviewed was in 2012.
I asked that just by comparison purposes. Your report tells us the City of Hamilton uses 30 meters from an intersection. City of Guelph, 30 meters. I believe there's another municipality uses 30 meters. A lot of them use what's called the daylight triangle. And the daylight triangle is that area around an intersection, which is the line of sight that motorists use, like when they're turning a corner and they need to have a line of sight to pedestrians or traffic coming from the other direction. So why are we maintaining 50 meters when it looks like the standard is 30 meters, or using the standard of the corner triangle or the daylight triangle?
Through the chair to committee. So a very good question, Mayor Davis. We did note that 30 meters was a distance municipalities were using, while ours is 50. The site triangle is already established within the bylaw, so that is a prohibited area. What we are finding is that it is very difficult to come up with the perfect data to suggest 30 meters is the right answer or 50 meters is the right answer. So because that was already established in our bylaw, we didn't have enough data to say we should shorten that to 30. But as far as your comments towards the site triangle, that is already established within the bylaw. So that would be would be prohibited within that area.
But isn't there a decision of the Committee of Adjustment the last year or two that seemed to create a different standard, or did I misread that? I didn't spend a lot of time reading it, but I thought that was the impact of it.
Good evening, Mayor Davis, Joe Muto, Manager of Development Planning with the city. We've had some requests through the minor variance process or application to the Committee of Adjustment in the past. However, staff's recommendation was overruled by the committee. So, you know, from a professional standpoint, both planning and development engineering would have provided concerns with respect to any of those specific applications. And the Committee of Adjustment had overruled the recommendation in those instances.
But what I'm getting at is, have they set a new standard, or just no? Is it not a precedent? What does it do to the interpretation of the sign bylaw? Maybe that has to go in camera, but I've been concerned about.
To Mayor Davis, Joe Muto once again. No, that would not set any precedent.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none. Julie, let's take the vote.
Item 7.1.3, proposed amendments to the City of Brantford Municipal Code, Chapter 478, signs, outdoor, other advertising devices, as approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Wall, Antosky, Martin, Sless, and Vanderstel.
All right, the next matter that was separated, 7.1.4, Fire Department establishing and regulating bylaw update. Councillor Martin, you asked for that to be separate.
Yes, I did. Thank you. And a question through you to staff. Is there currently a captain assigned to the aerial truck?
Through the chair, Todd Binkley, Fire Chief. Yes, there's a captain assigned to the aerial truck.
Okay. Thank you for this. This is exactly what I recommended to the previous chief when he insisted on putting 5 on staffing a pumper with 5. When asked for justification for that, he said nobody else was doing it, but I want to do it. And he totally dismissed my suggestion of upstaffing the aerial. So I'll be supporting this because it is what I suggested years ago to the then chief, who refused to take good advice. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question about this. So the impact of this is increasing the number of firefighters on, I think it's from 19 to 21, which hasn't happened since like 9 years ago. But so is the request, Chief, is that due to just a greater population we have to serve, or is it to make a particular piece of equipment more effective and better utilized in order to meet the higher demand of a greater population? Or is it just it's appropriate from an improvement in firefighting standards, or maybe it's a combination of the 3, or maybe it's something else?
Through the mayor, exactly to your point, it's really a combination of 3. It improves both public and firefighter safety. It ensures that the fire department meets the current best practice NFPA standard, and it ensures that there are 4 firefighters, which will allow that area to respond to many other calls similar to a pumper.
Yes, it allows the aerial truck, which I guess is the ladder truck. I want to check I got all that straight. It's the ladder extender. What I'm really showing my ignorance now here, Chief, but it will allow it to be the kind of the first responder of the fire hall.
It will allow it to respond as a first response vehicle if the pumper is outside of the area. And you're not displaying your ignorance. Ladder is an American term. Aerial is a Canadian term.
You don't watch, I guess I watch Chicago Fire too much. So with that, I mean, I can certainly support as well, because it has been 9 years since we increased the on-duty complement, and with the growth in population, we've got to make better use of our equipment, and this will allow us to do that. And this has been, from what I've seen, a fairly regular request on behalf of the fire department, but this year I think you very well explained it and presented the argument very well, Fire Chief, and I can certainly support it. It's obviously subject to our budget and going through that and determining this request in the context of other priorities. So next up, Councillor McCurry.
Welcome, Chief. Would you happen to know the year of the separation of fire and ambulance in City of Brantford?
Through the chair, no, sir. But I can say it was before my time.
Yes, although you have been around a while, if I recall. I wonder if since that happened, if there's been consideration to amalgamating those 2 services within the City of Brantford.
Through the chair, not to my knowledge, and neither the report in 2016 of the Fire Service Review nor the Master Fire Plan mention any recommendation towards that.
Are there still blended services in the province of Ontario where they provide fire and ambulance under the same administration?
Through the chair, I can't really speak confidently to that. I believe there are still some services more rural that have a blended service.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, is part of our needing more people on the aerial or staffing it up due to the fact that there's a lot of high-rise being built in the city. And I would think that the aerial ladder certainly plays into that to some extent. Can you comment on that? Are we equipped to deal with this onslaught of high-rise buildings?
Through the chair, the upstaffing the area will assist with multi-rise buildings. More specifically, because there would be more manpower on duty. Depending on the size of the building, high-rise fires are meant to be fought from inside.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martin, your second speaking. Oh, no. Yeah, your second speaking opportunity.
Thank you. First, in answer to Councillor McCurry's question, it's been more than 40 years since the ambulance was taken out of the fire department. I remember it was before I became a firefighter in Toronto that happened. And one of the benefits of this that the chief has left out is it gives you a complete crew that arrive on one truck. And that allows the incident commander to assign a task to them, be it search or ventilation or laddering the building. It's something that you now have a complete crew that is able to perform any of the tasks that a normal crew would be called upon to do. When it's just a captain and a driver, that's not really an option. You can't send them in to do a search because generally the driver stays with the vehicle. So this allows for a crew to be useful on that truck when it arrives, instead of having to steal somebody from another truck if they have to set up the aerial device to apply water or for a rescue. So this allows the truck to operate better, and it allows the incident commander to utilize the crew for any number of functions that a fire scene may call for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Martin. Councilor McCurry.
Chief, what's the reach of the ladder on the aerial truck?
Through the chair, the current aerial is 100 feet.
What's that equate to in terms of stories?
Approximately 5 or 6.
Okay, so folks that are living from 7th floor up are on their own?
Through the chair, buildings of that height require fire safety protection. So there are safety things in place for them besides try and are meant to shelter in place.
Thank you.
All right, not seeing any other raised hands. Julie, please administer the vote on this item.
Item 7.1.4, Fire Department Establishing and Regulating Bylaw Update is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Utley, McCurry, Carpenter, Van Tilborg, Wall, Antosky, Martin, Sless, and Vanderstelt.
Thank you, Julia. So we'll now deal with item 7.1.5. That's the Brantford Heritage Committee report. And there's an amendment on the second part, which is the Brantford Heritage Committee priorities. But the first part was not separated. That's been approved. So what we're dealing with is 2, and that's because I believe, Councilor McCurry, you do have an amendment.
Councilor Martin is my seconder, I believe. The amendment pertains to the Heritage Committee priorities for 2022 and reads as follows. The clause B be struck and replaced with the following: that the 2022 budget for the Heritage Committee be utilized to undertake the priorities identified in report 2021-641. And for the benefit of committee, it's simply a wording change. There was a bit of a boo-boo in the initial wording, and this clarifies it, and it's most appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that, Councilor McCurry. Any discussion on that? Seeing none. Julie, if you please take the vote on this.
The amendment to item 7.1.5, item 2 is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Utley, McCurry, Carpenter, Van Tilborg, Wall, Antosky, Martin, Sless, and Vanderstelt.
All right, let's move to the last item that was separated, which is 7.1.6. That's the Building Construction Process Review Task Force report. Sorry. Sorry, Julia's thrown a curveball at me. I didn't think we had to do it because we'd already approved 7.1.51, but 2 has been amended. So yes, we do have to have a vote on it as amended. That's technically quite correct. Oversight on my part. So we'll take the vote on that unless someone wants to talk further on this.
Thank you. Item 7.1.5, item 2, as amended, is carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Utley, McCurry, Carpenter, Van Tilborg, Wall, Antosky, Martin, Sless, and Vanderstelt.
You know, we really are well served by our clerk support staff and keep us out of trouble. So we'll move into the last item that's separated, 7.1.6, the Building Construction Process Review Task Force, and Councilor Utley, you asked that to be separated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to staff. In the report, and it's a very comprehensive report, I might add, from the consultant. In the report, it said that a recommendation for staffing will be coming to us in Q4 of this year. Does that mean at estimates or to committee at the whole?
Through the chair, Heidi DeVries, General Manager of People, Legislative Services and Planning. Actually neither to the councillor. That is through an HR committee report that will be delivered in December.
Okay, to committee of the whole.
To the Human Resources Committee.
And from there?
From there, they report into council.
Okay, thanks, Heidi. Appreciate that. And then lastly, a very minor detail. That report from the consultant is very comprehensive and detailed. I'd like a hard copy, but I wonder if the other members of the building construction task force might also want a copy. If the clerk could contact the task force to ask if they need a hard copy or not, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Antosky, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this was an impressive report. A lot of detail in there, and it looks like there's some low-hanging fruit. But I also noticed that there's a number of items that are saying, really now. So does that get drilled down further for the quick wins, the easy wins? Because obviously we can't do. Well, maybe we can do all of them now, but it looks like there's a lot of work that can be done here. It looks like some really good suggestions. I'm just wondering how that gets drilled down even further when there's so many things in the top category.
So through the chair to committee, the drilling down will happen in an implementation report that's currently being drafted by city staff. So you're correct, there are a lot of great opportunities identified in this report, and this report will be merged with the KPMG report that contains similar recommendations and opportunities, and it will be set out in an ultimate report from staff with an implementation plan and a timeline, identifying for the task force, first of all, how we intend as staff to how we recommend the implementation process. There is quite a lot of work to be done. Some has been completed already, some is currently in progress. And so similar to what our CAO did with the original KPMG report identifying service review opportunities, we'll be drafting something quite similar.
Excellent, thanks, Heidi.
Councillor Curry.
As the mover, I'm seeking leave from my seconder, Councillor Martin, to add an item to item C, which would also say, and a list of actions already undertaken. I'm just looking for an indication from my seconder on this, who would happen to be Councillor Martin. Thumbs up. Thank you. And it's simply a housekeeping matter. I understand that we have already undertaken some actions, which I think are important to note, that staff are already working on some of these items. And I think we can celebrate what we've already done at that point. Thank you.
Thanks for clearing that up, clarifying it. Any other? So we do have that friendly amendment, really matter of clarification. So any further discussion? Not seeing any raised hands. Please take the vote.
Item 7.1.6, Building Construction Process Review Task Force Report 10/28/21 regarding development application process review with the friendly amendment is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Utley, McCurry, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Wall, Antosky, Martin, Sless, and Vanderstel.
All right, we'll move. There are no resolutions for tonight's meeting, but we do have 3 notices of motion. So we'll move to 9.1. Councillor Antosky, please read the title of your notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Representative for FCM Cannabis Committee.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor McCurry, I understand you've got 2 notices of motion. If you would please read the titles.
9.2, always stop Elwood and Bernard Streets. Item 9.3, 40K speed limit for Sandra.
All right. So thank you very much for that. And the meeting's now adjourned as we've completed our business for the evening. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And as I said to the listeners and to the members, a bit of patience that night. It's There may be a few hiccups, but let's hope not. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.